irrigation and vertical shoe positioning on bilateral cordon, you need wires and posts and, triple everything. It's not unheard of to cost, 50, 60, 70 grand an acre to plant.
And that explains why Hain Vineyard wines, from them, whether it's Turley or other people, are going to be a little bit more money than.
Well, not entirely, not entirely. Yeah, clearly a lot of it has to do with some of it, and this isn't specific to Turley in any capacity. I just blanket this to say it's marketing, right? We were talking about another winery just earlier that some people had stopped up on their way, and we were talking about the marketing behind it, and. Well, it's beautiful branding, and the wines are really good, and you can tell they're putting a lot of energy and time and thoughtfulness into it, and that and kind of puffing up their chest a little bit to say, hey, these are luxury products, and the pricing is such, and again, that's speaking to your audience. That's not unlike what I was saying about there's a place for every wine, and hopefully. But when you put in a vineyard, you're really not getting fruit, commercially viable yields until year 3, year 4, maybe even year 5 if it's head trained and dry farmed. You're paying for the cost, right? The cost of money going in. You've bought the land, you've put in the vineyard. You're now, who knows how many hundreds of thousands or even millions of dollars in, and you're not even getting inventory. You can't get anything from it, so you're servicing the debt for 4 years. I think that plays a part into it, and then you get, reputable winemakers on board to help further your marketing, and maybe viticulturalists as well from, the global scene. These people are $250,000 a year, no problem. A lot of these wineries, that get involved with this aren't really designed to make money, to be honest with you. Owning a winery is a great place to offset capital gains from somewhere else. And you just keep sinking money into your asset, and never show the equity, and easy enough. But what it does afford is what we're doing today. I mean, coming out, teaming up with Dean and DeLuca, coming out to the Hain Vineyard, there is a lifestyle that goes with it that I think we all really like. Yeah, I live in the Napa Valley for a reason,
Now, with the Hain Vineyard, you've worked for this vineyard. You've worked with the grapes from this vineyard for how many years now?
Hain was one of the first vineyards as a part of the Turley portfolio, starting in 1993.
And you've worked with them personally?
I've personally been involved with Turley Wine Cellars since January of 2001.
So the reason that I asked that question is I'm curious is when you're working with a vineyard, especially a vineyard like this, and each vintage that you come to, are you learning more about each vintage that you get? You're learning more about what you can bring out of that, or is it more related to the weather patterns of that year in terms of, in other words, which way you're looking?
Yeah, no, it's a combination. We are pack rats for data. We've got, and that's the thing about collecting data, it really is only useful 15, 20 years later when you can look back on it and see averages and see trends and things like that. But every year is very different, Dave, and there is something to be learned from every year. And then the ability to go back and taste those wines. You know what? So 2005 was a very bountiful year. The wines were a little bit thinner as a result. Right, bigger clusters, bigger berries, and the wines just didn't quite have the same concentration. So what was it about that vintage that led to that phenomenon? And then post that, we've been in drought pretty much ever since. And you can see the wines getting more and more concentrated as there's less and less water, which is what's going to make this year so interesting. Not that we're necessarily way ahead on the curve of the drought, but it's the timing of the rains that's so important. So all the rain we saw in December, not really a value when it comes to this growing season. The rain we had, 10 days ago?
Yeah.
Well, that's pretty interesting. It was a half an inch that fell at least at the winery and here in St. Helena, and that's the moisture we're seeing right now. So what does that mean for the uptake of the vines? The other thing I can add about water too is that water that exists naturally in the soil is more useful to the vine than that of irrigated water. Right? So naturally existing water, there's better ion exchange with the roots, and they can grab minerals and nutrients and water itself more readily than they can through the drip irrigation. The drip irrigation only also provides water right here. Yeah. It doesn't really go very far. It doesn't force the roots to go down. It does have its advantages, and I'm not trying to totally poo-poo it in a way, but there's other ways to do it. Over at the estate at Turley Wine Cellars, we just put in about 6 acres of 10 by 10 spacing Zinfandel, cuttings from Hain, dry farmed head trained. in year one, we went through and we identified the weaker vines. We got out our water tank. We mixed, which is a 500-gallon tank, 400 gallons of water with 100 gallons of compost tea, 100 5-gallon buckets with a hole pierced in the bottom.
Oh my goodness.
And we placed them at the weaker vines. And we gave them a drink. A little bit of compost tea, some water, and that's all they got. And they are beautiful. I mean, you can look at the shoots, and you know, from the pruning from last year and the girth of the shoots, I mean, they're substantial. I mean, really, like, here they are. You know, we're not going away. The other, you know, sort of foil to this whole conversation is we've identified at Turley Wine Cellars in about the next 20 to 30 years, old vine Zinfandel is going to be a thing of the past.
Really?
Nobody's planting head train dry farm. They're all going vertical shoot positioning, bilateral cordon, or even unilateral, or whatever they're doing on irrigation. Those vines have to be replaced after about 25, 30 years. So we are snatching up as much property as we possibly can afford to do. We just picked up a 4-acre spot right outside of Healdsburg, right in Alexander Valley. 70-year-old head train dry farms in.
Wow.
Yeah, little 4-acre spot. I mean, it's not a lot of fruit. It's not necessarily that impactful in the totality of the portfolio of the brand. But it is our future, right? And the Turleys have 4 daughters. Like, how's this going to shake down? You know, there's the you know, and it's interesting conversation. We, you know, it's a lot of internal talk about that. What's going to happen here with the family? You know, Larry Turley owns 2 wineries, one here in St. Helena and one down in Paso Robles wine country in Templeton. But there's 4 kids. Who's interested and in what capacity? And you know, where will the fruit come from? And so, you know, it's interesting to think about. We look towards players like Gigal, right? So these guys are making $9.99 wines. They're making $299 wines. They're multi-generational family making this wine and this brand. And how do they do it? Like, what's really going on there? How is this successful? Because you can look around locally more readily at a lot of families that have had trouble passing it on. I could use the Mondavis as a great example.
Mm-hmm.
Right, going back to the early 50s and then again into the 2000s. That you know, history repeats itself there. It's a pretty interesting thing. So there's a lot of talk about that at the winery, and you know, it's sort of a little bit of a segue from where we were in irrigation and viticulture, but it is important. And I think sort of the grandeur of the lifestyle that comes with wine is also this phenomena of family business, and one year to the next, or one generation to the next. So, not that I have kids, but we'll see what happens.
And without getting too sappy about it, I mean, I personally got into this business in wine because it satisfies a bunch of different sort of needs for me. But I do think of wine anyway, it's a time capsule in so many ways, and it relates both to the wine in the bottle, to the families that have made it. I mean, it really does, I think, give a very good indication, if you're willing to look into it, of just how time has passed since the.
It's an amazing. I mean, you capture literally, and especially in the single vineyard designates of the world, it's literally a sense of place and time, right there. And I would also argue further to your point, Dad, that the great wines of the world speak not only of the concept of terroir, but the characters